going to bless your audience with knowledge about how to accomplish something, about something that truly interests you, or a procedure. Multiple of these will always be used in many different settings that you encounter, whether that be a case of you're presenting in an academic setting like a classroom, or perhaps you are presenting at a work. If you have to give like a quarterly report or an update, or if you're in HR and you're discussing procedures and policies within the company. Informative speeches you encounter in many different settings. My goal in this short introduction is to cover the rubric. Understand the rubric will truly help you get the most points out of your presentation. We'll give an example speech. That's why we find ourselves here today, where I'll be able to stand up and you'll be able to see body language, not just a floating head. And we'll cover some of the frequently asked questions that may come up. Hopefully I can hit off a few for you and give you some solutions. First thing, let's take a look at that rubric. The rubric is always your guide. In any class you're in, look at the rubric to find out where you get your points from. Because by doing this, you can prepare yourself to get the maximum points. Our rubric remains very similar to the last one we used. There are a couple things we've added in. First, I do want you to use that attention getter. I absolutely need you to draw your audience, to capture them, to get them involved in your speech. For that reason, I need you to have something other than, "Hi, my name is," which is not an attention getter. Instead, use that quote, use that picture, use something, a story, anything that gets your audience to pay attention to you and to be interested in what you're saying. After that, you're going to deliver your thesis. This is a simple thing, especially when we are talking about informative speeches. You're not taking a stance. You don't have to say, "I'm going to persuade you and this is my..." No, on an informative speech, I'm here to inform you about. I'm here to share with you. I'm going to tell you about. Those are simple theses that lead right into it. Next, after that, you need to have a justification. Why is it important to your audience? Why should your audience continue paying attention to what you are telling them? If you do this part correctly, you will truly enhance your speech. In this case, let's say I'm going to show you the recipe for making a quick 5-minute meal. Why is this important to my audience? You're college students, you're on the go, you are always needing something quickly, and ramen noodles isn't doing it for you. So I can easily tell my audience this is important to you because you're college students, you are juggling multiple tasks during your day, and a 5-minute healthy meal is what you need to know about. Boom. You can also say, "Hey, I'm going to tell you about the Star Wars trilogies because this is something that's truly interested to me and we all enjoy good entertainment." Anything that relates it to there. Next, you have to be credible. If you're going to share something with someone, you have to have credibility in what you're telling them. And for that reason, tell them why you're credible. "Hey, I am credible because I have taken classes on cooking and I have prepared meals since I was 5 years old. Cooking has always been a hobby of mine. I am truly a good cook." Boom, your audience will listen to you. And that credibility will, of course, mean something to them. Next, what you're going to do is preview your speech. 1, 2, 3. I'm going to tell you about making this meal. First, we need to talk about gathering or getting the ingredients. Second, I need to tell you about mixing. Third, I'm going to tell you about baking. Your audience knows right where you're going. They can follow along. They already know. They've looked at the roadmap. So when you move into the body of the speech, first, let's begin with the first item we need to discuss. That transition will bring you into the body of the speech. You need to organize it. Are you doing chronological? Are you doing it spatially? How exactly are you going to tell your audience this story and which way works, and that you stick with it throughout your speech, because you want to make sure that it makes sense to your audience. So organization is something we're going to look at when you hand in your full sentence outline, as well as during your presentation. Supporting material. What type of supporting material are you using? Are you using videos? Are you using books? Where's your drawing your information from? If I'm telling you about a recipe, perhaps I'm using cookbooks. Perhaps I am using statistics to demonstrate the health benefits of something. Of course, you don't want to move it into a persuasive speech, but statistics can still be utilized in this area. Next, transitions. Next, first, second. Let's begin with, now that we've covered, let's talk about. And in our final portion, all of those are transitions, signposts, things that your audience can follow and know where they are. Because if they don't know where they are, they're not going to pay attention. For that reason, you truly need to make sure you work on the transitions, and so are not solid transitions. Work on signposting and make it sure you're following your preview, you put it in the body, and you expand the material. Rhetorical devices. We've covered these. You had several examples of those. Easy to use. You use them a million times a day. Hyperbole. Absolutely. Utilize these to continue connecting your audience to what you're telling them. So utilize rhetorical devices. I'm just going to look for them in your outline, make it easy for me to find, and use them actually in your keyword, so that way when you deliver it, you get those points. Sources. We need credible sources. We talked about checking your sources in the last couple of weeks. We talked about finding sources, talking to the librarian, the CRAP test, making sure that we are citing good sources. I need at least 2 in here. That is easy to do. No matter what you have selected as a topic, you can find 2. You're going to talk to us about Frisbee golf. There's a publication on Frisbee golf. There's even an organization that oversees Frisbee golf. Both of those are credible sources. Cooking. Well, you might find out the history of chocolate chip cookies and share that as one of your resources. You might also draw your recipe from Betty Crocker cookbook or another cookbook. That becomes a viable source. Make sure to get the points here, in-text citation, in this case, just verbally say, I got this information from. According to, all those will help me see where you've drawn your sources from. The next thing we're going to talk about is signaling conclusion. Do it once. Don't tease your audience. Make sure you say, now in conclusion, today I talked to you about baking cookies. In so doing, we went over buying the ingredients, mixing, and baking. Boom. You've just gone over that. This helps give you a snack that you can enjoy at any time. Okay, you've re-justified why the speech was important. And then get that ending clincher in. Whether that be a case of enjoy those chocolate cookies as they melt in your mouth. Leave it with that. Don't go for too much, and don't end with, thank you, that was my speech, I'm now done. Don't do that. What you want to do is make sure you get those points for hitting that clincher. During this speech, I'm going to be looking for these things. These are your delivery techniques. We've gone over it, we've expanded it, we've explored it the last couple weeks. Eye contact. Now, eye contact in this case is you are making eye contact with the camera. It's right there. Make eye contact with it. That's where your audience will believe you're looking at them. Of course, in person, you would modify that, but for grading purposes, do that. Now, one of the questions will be, well, I have my note cards. What am I supposed to do with those? You know what? It's okay if you glance down at them and back up. I don't grade down for that. What I don't like is when you hide behind your note cards and you make total eye contact, you present your speech to your note cards. You do that, that's when you start losing points. especially if you do it over a long period of time, you'll lose maybe 1 point, maybe 2 points. To lose all four, you'd have to just talk to your paper. So make sure you're making eye contact with that camera. Voice, it's a tool. Please use it as such. Use all the techniques we've talked about with the pitch and the tone and the rhythm that you have in your speech. Speed it up when you want to be excited. Slow it down when you want to connect. Utilize those in your delivery. It'll be effective. Once again, if you deliver a speech that's monotone, where the entire speech is as if you are just reading it from a sheet of paper and your voice really doesn't fluctuate at all, that will lose you points. Next, extemporaneous style. Remember, a pause beats a filler word. This is where people tend to lose some points, is when instead of delivering their speech, they get caught up of, oh no, there's a second of silence, I better fill it with a and, but, all those things. All right? Make sure you don't do that. And make sure it's a conversation you're having with your audience. Think of it as talking to a group of friends, because that is how you want your audience to feel, is connected with you. Body language. Gesturing, yes, please, I need to see it this time. When we get to the example speech, that is what we will be looking at, is how you do that. So when we get there, watch for my body language. And I need you standing up this time. I need to see more of you than just the floating head. So let's look on body language. Professional appearance that meets your presentation goals. You know, only time I would say, yeah, go ahead and present in pajamas is if you're talking about sleeping, or you're talking about lack of complete motivation and how it's difficult to get up in the mornings, and so you're in your bathrobe and you're kind of looking like you just roll out of bed. Then that's theatrical attire. But if you're presenting your speech, your quarterly earnings report to the board of directors, and you show up that way, you get fired. So think about your audience, think about what it is the appropriate apparel to wear. In this case, most of your speeches will be business casual, which means think about, if you're going for a job interview, how you would dress. If that's how you would dress, then you're probably in the right ballpark. And finally, your time. In this case, we're doing 5 to 6 minutes. Try to stick to that. Realize this, that when you are giving speeches, sometimes you do have to stick to the 5 or 6 minutes. It might be they only have 15 minutes for that job interview that you're going for. And they want you to tell everything about yourself in 5 minutes. And then they want the rest of that time to do the interview portion. So you have to have it down to that 5 to 6 minutes. If you're going to 10 to 15 to 20 minutes, some places they'll turn off the camera. We've seen this at award ceremonies where basically the music starts playing and the next person starts walking up. So make sure you work on getting into that time period. To do that, it will require practice. Okay, now you can absolutely 100% utilize a PowerPoint or visual aids in this case. Now, when you're utilizing these, you'll be just like I am right now. That is what I'm doing. I have a PowerPoint and I am presenting and I'm recording, and I'm going to share it with you. And you can easily do this on Zoom platforms. You can also do it on several of the other platforms that are out there, either from Google or from Microsoft. Whatever platform, just make sure you're practicing with the technology so that you know it, and then abide by the rules we talked about. Not too much information on there. You want to use them correctly. You want it to aid, not distract from your speech. You want to make sure it makes sense, and you want to include your outline with it. So when you're doing this slide has too much information for a normal presentation. Well, I could get away with it. I'm breaking some rules. That's okay. My main goal is that you understand this is what you're going to be graded on, so this is the easiest way to do that. As we're going forward, now let's dive into the example speech. As you can see, I need to see some of your body for this speech. You may begin right before your speech by telling me your name. And the reason why I'm permitting this when it wouldn't be permitted in a classroom is because if you're recording Zoom, guess what? Names drop off. And I may not see your name, especially if you have several of your fellow students that have joined you and you're presenting together. So, before you begin your speech, you may say, my name is Brad McCauley, and this is my informative speech. And then you may begin your presentation. Note, I do need to see at least this much of you. So there are gestures. I can see the T-Rex arms. I can see the fig leaf. I can see the covering up. Basically, the reason why is because when you present, we do want to have an open stance, and we do want to grade those aspects of body language. If I can't see your body, I can't give you points on it. Let's go ahead and take a look at my example speech. Foss's invitational rhetoric. It is an important thing because discussions are always better than arguments, because an argument is to find out who is right, and a discussion is to find out what is right. Unfortunately, we don't always do that when we are engaging others. And that is something that we can absolutely learn to do. My thesis, today I will teach you about invitational rhetoric. And I will make sure you understand this concept is important because we engage people on a daily basis. My credibility, I have my master's degree in communication. I have my BA in communication studies. It's an area of interest. It's something that drew me into the communication field, so that way I could learn more about it and share it with others. I also lecture and teach at Front Range Community College, where many of you may know me from. What we want to talk about, we want to cover what is rhetoric, Foss's 5 forms of rhetoric, and creating the good environment in order to engage in invitational rhetoric. Rhetoric, that is a word that many people struggle with. So let's begin by defining rhetoric. The ability in each case to see all of the available means of persuasion. This comes to us from Aristotle. It is not a negative term. It is something that really is talking about what we engage in on a daily basis. So we do not need to look at rhetoric and be frightened of it. Instead, we need to accept rhetoric as being a wider concept than what we normally engage in. There are 5 different forms of rhetoric in which Foss says we encounter on a daily basis. We are not suggesting the abandoning of any. We are only suggesting the understanding of the 5 different forms so that we have better ways to engage with each other. This Foss told us in 2011. The first form of rhetoric that we normally encounter is called conquest rhetoric. It's the most common one we encounter in our society. It's what you may encounter whenever you're discussing what movie do we go to, where do we eat at, who's right and who's wrong. Of course, conquest rhetoric is saying a winner and a loser. It is not giving ground, it is conquering the other person. I'm not going to eat there, I'm going to eat where I want to eat. And in thus doing, we create the winner and the loser of conquest rhetoric. Conversion rhetoric. This is a little bit different, but not overly different than what you find when you're talking about conquest rhetoric. Instead of saying there's a winner and a loser, there still is a winner, except for we'll let the loser join us. Come over to our side. See the world as we do. We'll convert you to our view of the world. That is conversion rhetoric. This we encounter in advertising, marketing, sales, are all based on conversion rhetoric. Both of these are defined under the category of adversarial rhetoric. And they have a lot of bad feelings with them. Because if there's a winner and a loser, or if your view is wrong, you have to change your view. It makes you feel embarrassed. There's pain, there's humiliation, there's guilt. Foss talks about it as superiority and domination of others. These are the most common ones we encounter on a daily basis. Normally, these are the ones that we like to be right, and so we engage in those. The third form is benevolent. Benevolent is, you have something not right, let me help you. Let me bring you to a way of view that is more positive. It's not necessarily conquest. There is concern for the other. There is a desire to connect with the other. But there's still a lot of persuasion in there of trying to change the person. The other one is advisory rhetoric. We're doing that now. You've come to college and you said, I want to learn about this, and to learn about this, I want to engage with people that know what they're talking about. And that is exactly what we do in a classroom. Advisory rhetoric may also come to you in the form of at work when you are engaged with a mentor. Or perhaps HR will give you some advisory rhetoric. And this is not as negative of a form, of course, as the adversarial, but there still is a lot of aspects of one person talking down towards the other, rather than the people being on an equal plane. To reach that equal plane, our next topic is invitational rhetoric. In this way, invitational rhetoric is being willing to not just tell someone about your view, but be willing to change your perspective, to see their side of the argument. It's about creating equality so that people are communicating with each other, not at each other. Sharing the world through words. That's very important. Invitational rhetoric, to do this, we have to create the right environment. We have to be open to change ourselves and not look for who's right and who's wrong, but finding the truth of the matter. The environment has to have certain elements in order to engage in invitational rhetoric. And this becomes our next point of discussion. The environment, freedom. A person has to have freedom to engage or disengage. They have to understand you don't have to adopt my perspective. I'm sharing it with you. You are free to accept it and you're free to dismiss it. Change is your choice. I am not going to force that upon you. Safety. Oftentimes, when we start talking about adversarial rhetoric, it's based on intimidation, on being imposing, forcing. In invitational rhetoric, you don't want to force. Instead, what you want to do is let the person feel safe. Not only physically, but emotionally and intellectually. You're not going to call them stupid, and you are not going to say, oh, how could you have those feelings? What type of person has those? Those are destroying the safety. So you have to have that safety involved. Value. You value them to listen to what they are saying. You value them to practice good listening and to try to comprehend what they are saying, not to respond to what they are saying, because you value them. And openness. Any perspective can absolutely be included. It doesn't have to be one that you've encountered before. It doesn't have to be one that you support. You have to be open to hearing, and you have to be open to changing when change is necessary. Foss tells us this in 1995. In conclusion, We have explored several aspects of rhetoric. We defined what rhetoric is. We talked about Foss's 5 forms of rhetoric. And then finally, we talked about creating a healthy environment to engage in invitational rhetoric. This is important to you because we engage in rhetoric on a daily basis. As we engage in this rhetoric, we should understand the different forms of rhetoric we engage in. Invitational rhetoric ensures that all voices matter in a discussion. We focus on finding what is right and not who speaks the loudest. There you go. That was an example of an informative speech. Had I told you to change your rhetoric style, then it could have become persuasive. If I had challenged you with my clincher, now go out and engage in invitational rhetoric and don't engage in adversarial, that would have made it persuasive. So you can see how there's a close line. You can still be informative without being persuasive. Though, maybe hearing this, you have decided to change some part of how you interact with people. That does not make it necessarily persuasive. I just gave you the information. Now let's talk about those frequently asked questions. Do I need to write a full sentence outline? Yes, I hope by now you completely understand why. Because when you write your rough draft and you're outlining it and you're creating it, that tells you what you need to study. Okay, that tells you what information you need to bring in. And when you write that full sentence outline, you're fleshing it out. You're filling up your knowledge. You're becoming an expert on what you're talking about. So you're expanding that knowledge. And in that full sentence outline, you can then make sure how the flow is. You can make sure it connects. You can make sure you have it organized in a manner that connects with your audience. If you don't have that, and you just go from your rough draft outline and you present off of that, you might be missing gaps. You don't know how your presentation flows. Now, of course, because we're speaking extemporaneously, you're going to use a keyword outline. And your keyword outline is going to look a lot like that rough draft. But now you've put a lot of knowledge in your mind with that full sentence outline, and now you can speak from the keyword outline and increase your credibility. Do you have to use a PowerPoint in this one? No, you do not. In one of the next 2 speeches, either this one or the next one, you will need to have a PowerPoint or a visual aid, something of that variety. But it doesn't have to be on this one. In one speech, you'll get points for it if you don't use it. In the other one, you'll be graded on it. But I just need you to use a PowerPoint in one of the 2 speeches. So it doesn't have to be in this one, but get used to it. It's not that bad. I don't mind being the small box here that you see. That's okay. And this is exactly how your speech will look if you use a PowerPoint. Does your audience need to be live or recorded? As we mentioned, what you're doing is recorded live. Okay, you're submitting a recording. I don't have to see your speech live. If you want to join me during office hours, I'll be happy to watch your speech live. But what you have to submit, the very minimum what you submit, is your presentation as you're giving it to somebody. I'm going to get that recorded live. Okay, so if you're still struggling with that, let me know. Everyone did an excellent job with your first speech. That first speech kind of knocked through some of the aspects out of, well, how do I do this? The tech, we have addressed many of the tech issues, so you should be ready for this one. How do you submit your speech? On D2L. You can use Wuja, you can record it, upload it there. I need an MP4, as some of you notice, MP4 is too big, really, really big. And because it's so big, email says, oh, no, no. So in order to submit it, oftentimes having it on the cloud somewhere, you don't have to use YouTube. I don't like your speeches being out in the world. But if you use Wuja or another tool and you can send me the link so I can watch it, I'm good with that. And what we talked about today, we reviewed the rubric. You know what's expected now. We did an example speech. Hopefully that clarified it for you. And we discussed frequently asked questions. Here's an example of what you will have at the very end of your speech. I put it at the end of the class today. So references, you do the in-text citation, and then at the end of your presentation will be this, a reference page. APA format is what we utilize in communication, and it's what we use in most of the social sciences, especially like psychology, APA, American Psychological Association. So that is what we utilize here. Absolutely utilize this, and it makes sure that you're not plagiarizing so you don't get in trouble with the school. Finally, if you need anything, I'm here for you. Contact me. Let me know if you need me to cover something, discuss something with you. I am happy to do so. So I'll be here if you need me.